Welcome to episode 50, was it 53? I don't know.
53, yeah.
53 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. One of your co-hosts here, Sean, with my other co-host, Sam. Sam, how the hell are you?
I'm tired.
Why is that?
I'm tired because it's just fall, a lot to do. Today specifically, got a new couch, so got to do some heavy lifting of some furniture. I need to rearrange some stuff in the basement to accommodate a little workout and play area. I'm not nearly as tired as Haley is, the primary casualty of maybe a little sleep regression that our daughter's going through.
As tired as a dog on Christmas?
I've never heard that saying before. Why is a dog tired on Christmas?
I'm trying to make it happen.
Oh, okay, so it's not, it's a Sean original.
This is a Sean original. And the reason I say that, I don't know, my household Christmas may be different than most, but you've experienced it. Briggs dogs get pretty excited at Christmas with the number of toys and treats that they get.
It's true, yeah.
And getting real excited when people are opening presents and stuff. I don't know, I just feel like by 10 a.m., Abby is usually pretty hunkered out.
Okay, yeah. All the excitement usually makes maybe start humping, so.
Yes, it does.
And that's tiring.
So yeah, I don't know if you want to start saying it. Go for it.
All right, yeah, I might. I probably won't, but I might.
All right.
But you can.
I do. This is like the fifth time I've said it, trying to get it to catch on.
All right, well, it's now a part of this podcast. It's official Elves, Rings, Nerdy Things canon. Tired as a dog on Christmas.
It is a saying that some people say.
It's a saying.
Or some person says.
Well, why are we here today?
We're wrapping up part 2 of the Two Towers, talking about the extended edition scenes. We've really kind of focused in more on the scenes that were completely added, not scenes that, as the extended edition says, are slightly extended. So that's our focus. Brand new scenes to Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson's trilogy, and were they necessary to include? Was it okay that they were cut from the theatrical? Did we enjoy the scenes? Yada, 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 all that stuff. That's what we're doing today.
All right, well, let's jump into it. There's only a few completely new scenes in the second half of the Two Towers. We'll go into as much depth as we feel is warranted. But let's jump right into it with this first scene, One of the Dunedain.
This scene begins with Aragorn and Theoden on horseback on their way to Helm's Deep, having a conversation about Éowyn, her father's passing, and how Theoden should have been a more caring father figure to her. And then it leads into a conversation between Éowyn and Aragorn involving soup, where we reveal Aragorn's true age and that he rode into battle with Éowyn's grandfather, and that Theoden has a good memory of the event because he was just a young boy at the time. And I have to say, should have been included in the movie, in the theatrical edition, because this gives so much information about Aragorn as an individual. Up to this point, we've had conversations about him being Dunedain, and I believe Éowyn even says something about being blessed with long life, or somebody does at some point. But that's never really conveyed as to like how long of life. And then when we find out in this scene that Aragorn, who looks probably late 30s, early 40s, is really 87 years old. I mean, to me, that gives so much more depth of character that I think would have been useful in the theatrical cut. And shout out to my friend Cam Colin, because we reference this scene all the time with Éowyn's shitty stew that she makes.
I was going to say, it's also, you get some character development for Éowyn. She's not a good cook.
She's a terrible cook.
Maybe one of the reasons that contributes to her deciding to pick up a sword. She doesn't have a future in the kitchen.
the meat in the stew when he goes to eat it,
Yeah.
it looks. It's probably supposed to be like chicken or something.
Uh-huh.
It looks like just boiled fish. Like,
Oh, I think it looks like a loogie. Like
oh
it
yeah,
looks like a wad of snot. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I really like the scene because of it. It adds a layer to the differentness, the kind of unique position of Aragorn with long life. One of my favorite parts in the book is when they're Aragorn and company are arriving in Edoras, and they're talking to the guards, King Theoden's guards. They have to hand over their weapons, and the guards refer to Aragorn as like a figure walking out of the mists of history, or like walking out of a myth, because for as far as these guys know, the kings of Numenor, the Dunedain, are basically extinct, and this like a legendary race of men. And here's Aragorn, and he's 87, and he carries in the book he has the shards of Narsil reforged into Anduril, and so he is kind of like a step above your normal human, and literally, I think in the terminology Tolkien is called like middlemen and high men, and the men of Numenor were the high men.
well, that scene you referenced too. He in the books, he's also carrying Anduril.
Yeah, and he's like doesn't want to hand it over.
The hilt. Yeah. So that makes him even more out to be like a character coming out of the mists of time. If he's also carrying this mythological sword that they've probably heard stories about.
Yeah. So I like the scene. The soup thing, I think the soup is like just really great humor. And you kind of need some levity, because the rest of a lot of the Rohan stuff is pretty kind of depressing with the way things are. And then you get the moment where Gandalf frees Theoden, but then a lot of the stuff with Eowyn is pretty dark, and you get some good humor here. So yeah, it's a great scene overall.
And it's humorous, but it's also showing out how nice of a person Aragorn is.
Yes.
That he's willing to eat this really shitty soup, that he goes to pour it out as soon as she walks away, and then burns his hands as he quickly brings it back.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, I mean, development on so many different levels. Humorous, we get like personal character information, and then just more depth of Tolkien's characters and like different races that exist.
Yep.
Great scene.
Well, the
5
next
out of
one,
5.
5 out of 5, would recommend. The next scene is the Sons of the Steward. And this is a flashback to Boromir initially celebrating the recapture of Osgiliath. It shows him in full Gondorian armor above a crowd of soldiers. They're in the ruins of Osgiliath. And then it kind of transitions to conversation between Boromir and Faramir, the two of them and their father Denethor. And then we kind of get that, I guess, chronologically, the first instance of Denethor being a jerk to Faramir. And then there's also, it leads us to ponder what could have been, because this is the scene in which Denethor just mentions that Elrond is calling a council, summoning people to Rivendell, and it's contemplated that Faramir would go. But in the end, we know that Boromir does. Maybe things would have gone different. Sean, what do you think of this scene?
I think it would have been super useful in the Fellowship of the Ring. I am a Boromir defender. I think his character in the book is phenomenal, and the movies didn't do him justice at all. There's way more.
Are you talking about Boromir or Faramir?
I'm talking about Boromir.
Okay.
I mean, Faramir too. We can talk about Faramir.
Oh yeah, I think they did them both a little dirty, and Faramir more so. Yeah, but yes, continue.
So for Boromir in particular, his internal conflict surrounding the ring is much more prominent in the books. And to me, the movies, especially Fellowship of the Ring, if you just watch the theatrical cut, it's like, okay, here's this man who's an asshole who falls to the ring and then dies. But if this scene would have been included in the Fellowship, we get a little bit more strife between, like, knowing Boromir's background and then introducing Faramir at this point would make a little bit more sense. So then when you see him appear in the Two Towers with Frodo and Sam and Gollum, you already know who he is. I don't know. I think it would have been useful in Fellowship, but we get a cool reference from Boromir at the very beginning of the scene where he's talking about Osgiliath, how it used to be like a city of music and joy and art, a beacon of art, and it will be that once more. So that was a cool reference. Yeah, I don't know. I wish it would have been used differently.
Yeah.
And it's a good scene because the introduction of Denethor being an asshole.
I think I understand why they cut it, and I think partially because it would undercut the introduction of Denethor in Return of the King, when the first time you meet him is with Gandalf and Pippin, and you meet him kind of in grief over Boromir, and then you still get his scenes with Faramir later on in the movie, so you understand what their relationship is, and it still comes full circle with how the Return of the King, how Denethor and Faramir stories end. So I understand why they cut it. It's also a little long, I think this one is. And one comparison to the book is that in the book, Elrond does not summon people to a council, at least from far away. They kind of show up, and by kind of show up, both Boromir and Faramir have a dream. And I think in the dream, there's a riddle about oh my gosh, it's something, it includes a line in Imladris dwells or something like that. And I think it's kind of hinting at the ring and talks about halflings. And so you get this sense that both of these individuals are, for lack of a better term, receiving a message from God, from the God of the universe in Tolkien's universe. That's not in the book, but all of the commentary around the meaning of dreams leads us to understand this. And so it really is either one of these two people could have gone. Either one of these two people would have gone, and it would have been maybe part of the powers we're okay with. So I like that in the book. And then in the movie, you mentioned a little bit, they do Boromir a little bit differently. They really do Faramir differently. And I think you kind of needed there to be a conflict and a choice with Denethor, because it demonstrates the favoritism, which kind of is one of the central parts of Denethor's character, maybe more so in the book. I think in the book, he's just gone crazy.
Yeah, because in the book, isn't there references to the Palantir that he controls, and he's being twisted by Sauron, and he's seeing things that aren't there?
Yeah, I think you're supposed to, that is the case. And it's basically Sauron showed him stuff that made him despair to the point where it impaired his decision-making. Hence Faramir trying to retake Osgiliath, and his kind of lack of decisive action during some of the other parts, and then ultimately his suicide. So I don't know. Push comes to shove, I can see why they cut this scene, and I'm okay with it.
Next one is really short. Don't be hasty, Master Meriadoc. This scene is like a 20-second scene. It shows Merry kind of hopping around at the Entmoot, and then he walks up to Treebeard all in a huff and says, "Well, what have you decided? This is nighttime." And then Treebeard turns around and says, "We just finished saying good morning." And then Merry says, "But it's nighttime already." And then that Treebeard turns around and begins conversing again. So really all this scene does is kind of show how long of a decision it's probably going to take for the Ents to figure out what they want to do. And because it's such a short scene, I think they could have included it, just maybe tweaked it a little bit. Because in the theatrical cut, it's like, okay, we're going to have this Entmoot. And then they turn around and they're like, yep, we decided that we're not going to go to war. And then they just walk away. And then that's when Merry and Pippin have to talk him into going south or something to go past Isengard. But this scene, I think, does a good job of showing even a little bit more how long Entish takes to speak. the books do a really good job of talking, because like the word for acorn or something like that in Entish is like incredibly long. It'll take like a week to say. Like there's a couple examples of that, or wind or something like that. Do you recall that from the books?
I don't recall from the books, no.
So it's a cool callback, cool reference. I think it could have been written a little bit differently to make it a little bit more impactful. But if you're looking for a scene to cut, it's really not that substantial. It only saved 30 seconds. So
Yeah,
if that-
I imagine they didn't necessarily cut it for length, but maybe just more so because
didn't make sense.
we already have we know that the hobbits want some action, and we get that later. I think, in the books there's not really a ton of drama at the Entmoot. Don't they just kind of resolve to take action? It takes them a while because of the Entish speaking, but there's no. It's unlike the movie where it takes Fangorn or Treebeard seeing the destruction of trees around Isengard
to call them up. Yeah. In the books, they decide to go to battle.
Yeah. Okay. The final tally, or no, excuse me. The next scene is Fangorn comes to Helm's Deep. So this is just kind of at the end of the battle of Helm's Deep, after Éomer and Gandalf show up and save the day. As Aragorn and Theoden are riding out from the castle, all of the Uruk-hai retreat, and they discover that the forest has moved into basically the mouth of the valley, and all of the Uruk-hai run into the trees, and there's some sound effects, and the trees are shaking, and I think it's Éomer who says, don't go into the trees or something like that. Mm-hmm. And they don't, and I guess it's implied that all of the Uruk-hai are just wiped out in the forest
massacred
by whatever. What did you think of this scene?
I like that it shows the trees have some life to them, and it's not just the Ents, and it's kind of a reference to Old Man Willow that we don't get. And there was also another reference to Old Man Willow in the last episode that we recorded, when Merry and Pippin get swallowed up by the roots of the tree.
Yes.
But I guess you kind of need it, because there's a reference earlier, right after Treebeard sees the destruction around Isengard. You can see all the trees starting to walk away. And then Treebeard says to Merry and Pippin, they have business of their own. And then you can see the trees starting to move. So I guess it's good to see like the resolution of the trees moving. This is the one time in my rewatch where I've gone, this is pretty awful CGI.
Yeah.
When you see the trees and the Uruk-hai running into the trees, it looks awful.
Yeah.
So I feel like it could have also been cut, because they were like, we just want to finish the movie and we don't want to animate.
We don't want to finish these animating the too many layers, too many polygons.
Money. Yeah, so let's just cut it, because that's honestly what it looks like to me.
It could have been that, but eventually, they finished the scene and put it in here. So they had, I guess, maybe once the movie had run in theaters for a while, that they had
still doesn't look finished to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's that. We need the special edition, the Redux, Peter. I'll say that I don't need this scene, because once in the movie, it needs to be clear how all of the Uruk-hai, all of Saruman's forces are completely destroyed basically overnight. In the book, you need that. In the movie, you can accomplish that by showing the charge of Gandalf and Éomer, and then just go on. I remember watching in the theater and having no problem with what happened to the rest of the Uruk-hai, because the movie
cavalry.
The cavalry shows up, it destroys them, drives some of them away, whatever. They're a spent force, and then I don't worry about it. And then the movie moves on, and we very quickly get to other stuff, and then the movie ends, and I'm not thinking about it anymore. And it's like the scenes were effectively done, where it's not like a plot hole, like, oh, what happened to all the Uruk-hai that survived the battle? So they could have cut it, and cinematically it would have been totally fine.
Next scene, the final tally. Gimli and Legolas having a conversation after the Battle of Helm's Deep, where they're comparing numbers killed. Gimli has one more than Legolas. So Legolas shoots an arrow on top of underneath the orc that Gimli's sitting on and claims that they tie. I hate this scene. Do you want to know why?
Why is that?
A reference to the nervous system that completely takes me out of the movie. Because there's a reference, they have the comment where Legolas shoots the arrow, and then
it's like, because my
still
axe
twitching.
is embedded in his nervous system.
I know that I hate that scene every time, and I'm so happy that they cut it because it does not deserve to be in there. You're telling me that a fantasy piece of material that is based on medieval knowledge knows about the intricacies of a nervous system because your axe is embedded in its brain?
Yeah.
I hated that scene.
Also, I mean, Legolas is it's a totally cheap move, right? Legolas,
well, that I don't mind. Like, if they would have cut it without referencing the nervous system, I would have been fine.
Okay.
Like, if it would have been, oh, I saw it twitch, I killed it, and then they have a conversation about it didn't twitch, it was dead, or something like that, and then you could leave it to be a humorous thing. But the moment you reference a nervous system,
it takes you out. It's terminology that doesn't fit. Yeah. So, real quick aside, related to this, where do you stand on the Legolas skateboarding down the stairs on a shield? Where do you stand on that debate about whether it should or should not have been included in the movie?
See, that I find as dumb fun. I think you've already established that this being can walk on snow.
Yep.
So for me, could he keep his balance on a metal shield going downstairs? It's plausible based off of what you already told me about the character.
Yeah. I thought of it. I thought of that debate because I think there's like an entire Facebook group about that scene in the early days of Facebook, an entire Facebook group about how that scene was ridiculous. And the critique was always, okay, so you want a fantasy movie to have an accurate depiction of skateboarding down stairs. And by the way, that's probably physically possible for a human with enough practice. So it's not like that that's not that extraordinary, but it's also just such a cool scene because he's shooting arrows and then he kicks it at the very end and it impales an Uruk-hai. It's such a great scene.
That's where I might go.
Come on.
Might be a little too much. But I'm here for the whole thing.
The shield, we've seen it. We've already established that those shields can like penetrate the tree. It penetrates the tree. You could imagine it would be able to penetrate armor.
I guess. I mean, I'm not even disagreeing with you. Yeah. I'm just saying, if you're going to critique anything about the scene, I think it would be that he kicks it into another Uruk-hai's neck.
If you're going to critique anything, if the number one thing that needs to be critiqued about the Two Towers is how there is no way that those elves from Lorien could have gotten to Helm's Deep. They had that's a long way to walk.
Speaking of leaving things out of the book, in the books, isn't that a troop of Dunedain led by Elrond's sons?
They don't show up at Helm's Deep. They show up after Helm's Deep.
After Helm's Deep. But still, it's the same concept of a group coming to assist.
That's true. And I guess in the Return of the King, we'll talk about in Return of the King because there's a little bit of that in the third movie.
Yeah.
The troop of Rangers and Elrond's sons. Okay, the next scene is Flotsam and Jetsam. So this is a title taken directly from the book. There's a entire chapter in the Two Towers titled Flotsam and Jetsam, in which in this scene we get Merry and Pippin in the aftermath of the Ent attack on Isengard, and there's water everywhere, and they're looking for food, and they discover the storeroom of Isengard full of nice foods, and most importantly, a couple barrels of pipe weed from the South Farthing. I don't think it's taken from the book, but it kind of fills in a scene that's implied to have happened. I think Merry and Pippin are met having already discovered the food and are enjoying themselves, as we see in, there's a scene of this in Return of the King when they
Very
show up
beginning.
and they're already smoking and eating. So this is the backstory to that scene. What did you think of this one?
It was fine. I didn't need to know how Merry and Pippin found the salted pork and pipeweed.
Yeah. And
I can just assume that they found it.
and then they tell us that they found it. So
Exactly,
it's like, we don't need this scene. All right, conversation over. Next scene.
Yep. That was the fastest scene.
Oh, this is
maybe,
this is the final extended, or the final new scene rather.
Yeah, the last scene is the farewell to Faramir. It's a conversation between Frodo, Sam, and Faramir, where Faramir is trying to figure out what their next plan is. Sam basically says, "You've shown your true valor as an honorable man.
You've shown your quality."
Your quality." Yeah, that's right. Because it's a direct reference to the Denethor comment. And then we get a confrontation between Faramir and Gollum when Faramir realizes where Gollum is leading them. And he says he has heard of a like monstrous terror or something like that living in the pass. So I like it anytime you give me, and that's what, if anything, the extended edition in at least the second and third films really give me more of what I wanted out of Faramir in the theatrical cut. It gives you way more character development. It lets you understand who he is and that he's not just like some ranger out in the wild, that there's more to him than that. And he's much more like the books in the extended edition than he is in theatrical. And I still wish the only reference that they really give to him as being like a student of Gandalf, basically, is Denethor calling him not some wizard's pupil. And that's a really weird reference when you don't understand anything else that happens in the books, because it is used in the movie. But at this point, you never see Faramir interact with Gandalf, anything like that. So, I don't know, just a weird sequence of events in that. But
yeah, you can get the sense that probably the original script and definitely the extended edition script had more of an attempt to do right by these characters, but the ultimate theatrical release is like, okay, we can't have characters that are all just like really good dudes, right? Like Faramir in the book is just a really good dude. Aragorn in the book is just a really good dude from the beginning. He wants to be the king. Like, he wants to come back to the throne. He has the reforged sword beforehand. In the movie, he's got to go on a journey to get to the point where he, picks up the mantle of the king and accepts the sword and puts down the ranger and becomes the man he was born to be. In the book, he was just doing that from the beginning, and he's just like kind of steadfast. Faramir, he has this kind of back and forth, almost he does kind of fall victim, maybe not to the ring's power, but to the desire to prove to his father his quality. And, that's why he takes Frodo and Sam to Osgiliath on, he's planning to, at that point, take them all the way to Minas Tirith. So, we don't get that in the book. In the book, Faramir is just a solid dude who helps Sam and Frodo on the way, points them in the right direction. And it would have made for a more boring movie, even though it would have been accurate to the book, because there's so much other stuff in the book that is wonderful to read in those scenes.
And it also makes me think of the line between Faramir and like his lieutenant, where he says something along the lines of, to Faramir, you've gone against the law of the land. Now your life is forfeit.
Yeah.
Like, I always found that to be they never really reference it. Like, is the forfeiture of life having to charge into Osgiliath?
Yeah, you think that's just something that, like, well, what about all the other dudes who charged into Osgiliath with him, right?
It's like never referenced before. So like, in that case, Denethor knows that Faramir is going to fail, and he's sending him to his death purposefully. And he's not crazy enough to think that Osgiliath can be retaken. And I always thought he was crazy enough to think that Osgiliath could be retaken.
Oh, see, I think that's an interesting discussion because I
Because then you come back to that line, then your life is forfeit, and then it's never brought up again.
I think the death of Boromir turned Denethor's hopelessness and desperation into kind of like a callous distancing from the reality of things. And so, despite the fact that it would be a fool's errand to try to retake Osgiliath, it's what they should do. They need to fight. They shouldn't. What is it? We shouldn't surrender the Pelennor. So
just without a fight,
quickly, without a fight. And so it's like I don't think at that point, I don't think he really. He's not thinking strategically or tactically about what's the right thing to do and can we actually retake Osgiliath or shouldn't we? But it's like what we need to do is retake Osgiliath. So that's what you're going to do, kind of ignoring the potential disastrous consequences of it because he's been driven mad by Sauron and also is deeply in grief for Boromir. But I don't think it's any sort of like repayment or punishment for his Faramir's violation of the laws of the land. And that, now that you mentioned, I always remember that scene because it's like it sounds like something important, but it
sounds like Faramir's like going to be executed.
Yeah, it never pays off
because he even says then it is forfeit.
Yeah, which is like, okay, I mean, but then that doesn't pay off if that is supposed to link with the charge to retake Osgiliath. You'd think that it would have happened in Return of the King. Like, you don't need that line in the Two Towers. You could easily reference it in the Return of the King and then pay it off with the charge later on. Anyway, that's
in the weeds.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts about the Two Towers, extended scenes, new scenes, the overall watching experience?
I've kind of summed it up already. I just think extended scenes give you depth of character. In some cases, needed depth, like in Faramir's case. And then in other cases, like Aragorn, with that first scene we talked about, I think it helps knowing that he's so different than the Rohirrim who are all around him, and the fact that he's 87 years old during the events of Lord of the Rings. All of that is incredibly important, I think. But
he's a good looking octogenarian.
I was going to insert Biden reference here. But
yeah, that's what we need. We need Biden with a sword charging at the Black Gates.
I wish Biden was a Dunedain.
Yeah, there's a lot of the new scenes and the extended. I think it's a lot of the extended scenes as well. There's so much in there about Aragorn and his relationship with Arwen, and to me, I really have grown to appreciate that relationship and their love story, and two, Aragorn is just such a solid dude when it comes to his relationship with Éowyn. I gotta be quiet.
He friend zones her.
Well, he friend zones her, but he's not like he's polite. He's genuine.
He genuinely cares for her.
He cares for her, but it's not romantic. He like sees her as I won't say a
leader,
as he sees the potential in her, and I think he's trying to like push her toward that potential. Mm-hmm. There's a scene of dialogue about leading people into the caves, and I think he talks about how there's something about how courage has to manifest itself differently in everybody, or something along those lines, or talking about how it's an opportunity to to be a leader.
He kind of references too that should we fail, you're the last line of defense.
That's what it is. Yeah.
He's like, if they make it to the caves, you've got to give them time, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, great scenes with Aragorn. Fantastic character. I love the Two Towers. It's such a good entry in the the trilogy.
I keep coming back to that, where people have asked me, rank your Lord of the Rings movies. Return of the King will forever be my number one. I could pop that movie on and watch it whenever. It's my favorite of the three. For a very, very long time, Two Towers used to be my second favorite.
Mm.
But as I've aged, The Fellowship of the Ring has inched its way into my number two spot. And it's rough because like I love the Two Towers, but I might love Fellowship just a little bit more.
See, I think for me, well, we'll hold off this discussion until we finish Return of the King, because I need to get back with Return of the King. I think of the three, I've seen Return of the King the fewest number of times. I think so.
Return of the King just has multiple moments that make me emotional.
Yeah, it's same for me. Same for me. I think. Yeah, we'll see. I need to sit down and give it a thorough watch, because I haven't done that in a while. And I've seen the Fellowship and Two Towers. I've seen all the way through more recently than our current rewatch.
Well, that's it for us.
That's it.
Here at Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We have 2 more episodes of talking about the extended scenes of the Return of the King, and then we will figure out what we're going to do after that.
Okay. Well, I should probably sign off because I'm waking up my daughter, and that's not good.
That is not good.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
You can sign off, Sam. I'll do the rest of the sign off.
All right. Bye, everybody.
You can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. We have a Facebook group, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things Podcast. You can email us at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com, all one word. Don't type in "and." If you have any preferences on what we cover after Return of the King, let us know. We are happy to take suggestions. And we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.